Welcome to City and State TV. I'm Executive Editor Michael Johnson. I'm joined now by Tenicka Boyd. She is the Director of Organizing at Students First. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we wanted to bring you in and talk a little bit about charter schools. There's a lot of talk about that on the state level because Governor Cuomo has proposed to increase the cap to 450 and to open it up for the whole state, where right now there's a cap in New York City, there's a cap in upstate or outside of New York City. I wanted to have you talk us through a little bit of what the charter school process is and what do you think is going to play out in Albany?
Yeah, well, first, I think what the governor is proposing is really great, right? And so it opens the opportunity for a lot of kids who are waitlisted. There's 50,000 kids in New York City alone who are waitlisted for charters, and there really isn't a ton of room. What a lot of people don't realize, I don't think, is that the state really is the authorizer of any new charter coming in. And so there really is checks and balances. A lot of people don't realize that. But what I love most about the governor's proposal in his budget is that he's opening the door for more kids to have access to high quality charter schools and really to benefit from the innovation that's happening in the charter school space. So I really support that.
And I think that we were talking before the interview, but you were saying that your goal at Students First is good, high-quality schools, whether they be charter schools, whether they be district schools. That's what the goal is, and you think that this would just create more competitiveness, more opportunity, more creativity to reach that goal.
Yeah, I mean, I come to this space not just as someone who believes that education is the gateway and pathway, but I also come to this space because I am a parent and I do send my daughter to a district school. And so I believe that every parent should have the opportunity, like I do, to send my daughter to a great school, whether that's a district school, a neighborhood school, or whether that's a high-performing charter school. I think we live in a country, in an amazing state, in an amazing city that has the ability to give kids what they need instead of relegating them to historically or persistently failing schools.
And do you think that there should be probably a higher standard then for any school, basically, to make sure that they're not failing schools? And I know that's something that the governor has proposed as well, is to keep a better eye on failing schools. Are you happy with that proposal as well?
Yeah, I think what we all agree on is that schools are struggling, right? And so what we know, based on what the state has recently released, is that there are 178 schools that have been failing, 77 of which have been failing for years, persistently and historically failing. And when I go into the communities that I serve in Bedford-Stuyvesant, East New York, Jamaica, Queens, I could have said that anecdotally, right? But it's great to really have this data set that says, listen, we're increasing funding by 13% over the last how many years, all the while scores are decreasing and kids continually, fail and are subject to ineffective teachers. What I love about what the governor is proposing in his budget is that we need to figure out a way to create a fair teacher evaluation system that manages that process, making sure that we are rewarding high-performing teachers, which I think in any profession, you want to be rewarded if you're doing particularly well. Figuring out the best way to create master teachers so that those teachers can be a resource for underperforming teachers, and thinking about the ways that we can help teachers who are developing and figure out a way to usher ineffective teachers out of the system and making sure that kids in low-income communities and communities of color are not subject to an ineffective teacher 2 years in a row. That's like common sense, right? And so I think it's really important what the governor is doing, and I think it's just another step in the right direction. And the time has never been so urgent to do something like that.
And I know there's always pushback from teachers' unions, and just in general, there's a lot of kind of interest and entrenched interest into the public school system or the district school system. Do you feel like there is room in Albany to enact some of these reforms to get away from, what turns out to, always gets perceived in the media, but also just kind of in general, it politically turns out to seem like it's a fight between unions and people who are opposed to unions. Do you think there's a way to kind of get past that and actually enact some of these reforms this year?
Yeah, well, I will say that our organization is not opposed to unions, and we're not opposed to collective bargaining or anti-teachers in any way, right? So I am just as much of a latte liberal as anybody, and I support unions as well, and have deeply entrenched democratic politics myself. But what I think happens, right? It's the moral conscience for me. I am a kid who was raised in a low-income family, and my mother sent me to school every day in good faith. And what I was learning in the area that I lived in, the low-income area, was not the same as what was being taught on the other side of town. The expectations for me were different, right? And so I understand that legislators have a really hard way to go because they're dealing with financial contributions. They're dealing with, relationships they've had for 10 to 15 years. But it's really time for us as a state to really think about the trajectory of our kids, right? It's tough. Nobody said it would be easy, but it needs to happen. It needs to be done.
Do you feel like that you have been able to work with the UFT and other unions before to reach goals? Do you have examples? I know the UFT had their charter school, which recently had the setback of the negative remarks or reviews on it. So do you feel like there's room to work and maybe either expanding charter schools, bettering schools with the unions directly, maybe?
Yeah, I think that there is a crucial role for unions to play in pushing for reform. I think it's important that we all work together. What I will say, though, as a parent, my child, I can't wait until the union decides that it wants to take this on, or that it's the right thing to do, or even that it's the right thing to do for the teaching profession. I know as an organizer, if there's a low-performing organizer, I'm a part of figuring out how we either bring that organizer to where they need to be or figuring out a new career path for them. So I think absolutely there's room for collaboration. There's room for district schools to learn from high-performing charter schools. And I think there's a ton of room. So yeah, I definitely think that we can work together.
And before I let you go, this legislative session, what would you classify as success? What would you really like to get out of there? Is there one specific thing, or is it kind of just a larger comprehensive reform?
I mean, listen, I'm a go big or go home type of person, and I think that what the governor is proposing is so amazing. It's so great for kids. It's so good for parents. It will really change the trajectory of kids' lives. We have kids going into schools that they're going to college and they're taking years of remedial courses, and we really have the opportunity to change that. So I'd like to see everything. I'd like to make sure no child has an ineffective teacher. I'd like to see teachers get rewarded with a $20,000 bonus. I'd like to see a turnaround plan for failing school. I'd love to see more high-quality charter schools. I think all of it is great.
Well, Tenicka Boyd from Students First, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.